Volkswagen is going through a giant EV crisis. The CEO is warning all EV makers the roof is on fire. That's what he said. They haven't been able to deliver what they promised. They're shutting down production, and more than 300,000 cars are just sitting in the dust. And bankruptcy is just around the corner. But this is bigger than that, and it's just the start of what is to come for all EV car makers. Tesla just passed them in sales, and even the small Chinese company BYD did too. All hope is gone for VW. But why? Why is the EV crisis happening? Will they come back to life, and how will this affect you? And trust me, it will. There's more to the story than what's being told. What is really happening? Everything got out of control when the CEO decided to call in the highest 2,000 senior managers in an hour-long meeting, and he said the roof is on fire. Their costs are rising too much, too fast. Thomas Schaefer, the CEO of Volkswagen, said this is a wake-up call, and all the media attention has gone to them since then. What other confirmation do you need to believe that they're in a big mess and they're not alone? The other two German industry titans, Daimler and BMW, are going through the same thing, and things might seem very different in the US and all over the world. But this will have a domino effect, and soon everyone, including you, will be affected. Because this is not just about Volkswagen. The same reason that rotted Volkswagen from its foundation might be on the way to infect the whole automotive industry. It's the result of blind policies, poor management, scandalous deeds, and a volatile market. Does this sound familiar? Tesla, the golden company of the US, has taken over them in sales numbers in just 1 year. But still, this could happen to any company if things aren't managed very well. Every year, new competition joins the EV market. Yet the world has not gotten anything good in return except for promises and policies. One of these new entries was Volkswagen, and they didn't know what to do when the rainy day came. Despite EV sales growing by 45% each year, Volkswagen is losing money by the minute. They're deep in debt with no way out, and they've done everything they can, but still it hasn't made a dent. This is at the very least concerning to everyone, whether you don't like EVs or not. If you think this is not a big deal, let me explain how all of this happened. The debt disaster. This is not something that happened overnight, and all the signs were there, but nobody, not even the management, seemed to care. When Schaefer said we're raising the costs uncontrollably, he was talking about the massive debt they had to pay, and they can't pay it anytime soon. With a massive debt of $192 billion, Volkswagen is one of the most heavily indebted companies in the world, closely followed by Daimler and BMW, with $151 billion and $114 billion respectively. Volkswagen has so much on their plate. Their sales are decreasing drastically, and they have more than 300,000 cars just stored across 37 facilities in the US alone. They are panicking. And as they always do when sales are going down, their car prices also go down. To us, we're just watching from the sidelines. And even if you want to buy a Volkswagen car, why would you do that? Now everybody is betting on their downfall, and who knows how affordable and cheap the prices will get. And we believe in numbers because they don't lie. The average price of a Volkswagen car has declined by almost 0.5% in the last 30 days of making this video, and by almost 6% in the last year alone. And this includes all their vehicles, including combustion engines. But this is mostly due to what is happening in the market and poor management. Policies are often made without consulting manufacturers, and companies are forced to follow the rule or get out of the game, and this is exactly what is happening to them. Scandals and policies. Governments want to be praised by the world for being the most green and environmentally friendly state, but so do the companies under their leadership, and sometimes things get out of control. We're not talking about EVs, although we will get there in a few minutes. This is about the scandal that happened back in 2015. They installed software that provided false information during emissions tests, and they had to pay billions in fines and settlements, thus beginning the rise of cost and debt. But that is nothing to a company as big as they are. Sure, it's a huge amount, but billions are just profits of a quarter year for them. But what this really did was destroy their brand and image. So sales went down, and they made their cars cheaper and cheaper. But how low could they go? And this only does one thing: make their brand cheap and unreliable, even to their most loyal customers. This is why cars left to rust inside stores, and nobody wants to get involved in this. Thus, Volkswagen started to switch to EVs, but EVs have huge problems on their own. They're hard to make and very expensive, and Volkswagen can't afford to add another cost, but they did it anyway. The start of their EV journey. They have committed to spending $86 billion on this segment, but Volkswagen does not want combustion engines to die. But how can they pass on the future of the world? But most of all the subsidies and tax breaks come with this decision. The once cheating company that had a bad emissions rating is now at the forefront of sustainability and green energy in the automotive industry. But like we said earlier, making EVs is hard. There's research and development cost, building charging infrastructure and production capacity, and somehow figuring out and staying on top of the battery technology advancement. Which, in simple words, means they needed a huge investment. And although Volkswagen is trying to rebuild its brand after the scandal, again, the numbers don't lie. They had parked 350,000 cars in the middle of the desert, left to rust. And who would want to take that risk? On top of all of this, the EV market has its own giants. The world's richest man got there because of this industry, and winning a fight against that is close to impossible, even for them. But then again, this is Volkswagen, so they did it anyway. But what they were counting on was all the subsidies that Germany would give them, and it was what they needed. It was like all their dreams were coming true right in front of their eyes, but it turned into a nightmare when the government decided to end EV subsidies for business customers, which is a segment that constitutes a large portion of the new car market in Germany. And for Volkswagen, this is adding insult to their injury, because this is their target market, and it was a huge loss for them. Just look at one of their biggest factories, Zwickau. More than 70% of the cars made there were sold to business customers. Following this, people started to buy all the EVs available until the deadline, and this caused a 171% increase in total EV sales only in August, further putting pressure on their supply chain. And just as expected, when the deadline came, so did the fate of Volkswagen. Because there's only one more thing you need to understand. EVs have huge problems. They're hard to make, and we say this again and again because it's true. But don't take our word for it, just look at what is happening to all the companies that follow the trend blindly. Even the biggest and most successful players in this market are constantly raising concerns about all the challenges, and to be honest, it's just common sense. If they were as good as they are advertised, why would the industry have tax breaks? It just doesn't make sense. Unless you have a company that is totally prepared for this, you're going to go down a hole. Because there are two main challenges that you need to figure out somehow in order to be the next Tesla or Elon Musk. The first is scarcity. Lithium and other crucial rare earth materials are very rare, and this makes the prices go up and up constantly. The second is logistics, and until a company figures out a way to solve these two problems, losing is inevitable. And that is exactly what happened to them. They're currently having a huge EV crisis, and everything they do can't seem to pull them out of the rut. Almost all of the major full electric releases recently have not been successful, and they seem to be almost giving up. Again, the numbers speak louder. The production of the ID.3 and Cupra, two of the major EVs Volkswagen makes, will be reduced in the Zwickau factory, which we just talked about earlier, and at the glass factory in Dresden. They will not be making the ID.3 model anytime soon. On top of this, due to decisions made by all the board members, the newly planned factory and their only hope against Tesla was cancelled. And to be honest, this might be good for them. Because the company is in massive debt. This would have cost them an additional $2 billion. But their problems just get worse and worse by the day. And now it is in China, their biggest market by revenue. They were the first in sales numbers, but they got overtaken by BYD. And what did Volkswagen do? You guessed it. They reduced the price again and again. And the same thing happened, and this time it was a bit different. Because even though they lowered the price, their cars are still expensive for the Chinese market, and this is due to their agency model, which means that they are the ones in direct and total control of the price. And you might be saying, that sounds amazing, and it is. There would be no dealer premiums, and the price would be low, but this is a company that needs to make as much money as possible, so you don't need us to tell you how it all went down. From outside, it might seem obvious who is at fault for all of this mess, but they were simply spread too thin, and you never know what you would have done until you're in the business. This is all for now, but if you want to know more about the current EV market, we've made a video on the amazing revelations of the Jeep CEO. Thanks for watching and see you there.